And welcome into the locker room. Brand new year here. 2016 is our first show of the year. And boy, we got a great one. A lot of football this weekend. Championships here in Alabama. Let's start with the JSU Gamecocks. They head to Frisco, Texas to take on North Dakota State.
What a unbelievable matchup for JSU. This is the first time being back on the national championship scene since 1992. Their first one ever as now a Division I school and competing in FCS football. I think one of the biggest takeaways for JSU this year is that they've been ranked number 1 all season long, and well, for the most of the season, since week 2. And they beat Chattanooga at the beginning of the year. They beat Chattanooga in the playoffs. They beat Sam Houston State, who beat them. This team just feels like, if you want to call it as cheesy as it kind of sounds sometimes, this team of destiny.
Yeah.
They kind of sound like that. And then they're taking on the ultimate team of destiny over the last 4 or 5 years in North Dakota State. Should be super interesting.
You know, we've seen a lot of players come out for JSU. You know, before the season we were hearing these names, Eli Jenkins, Josh Bars, Jermaine Pope. But what a year these guys have had.
I mean, it's been unbelievable. I mean, they're All-American years in some categories. The OVC Player of the Year, hands down, almost unanimous, was Eli Jenkins. Josh Bars could have made an argument for that. Jermaine Pope could have made an argument for that. Several players in the defense, including Chris Landrum and then Jermaine Huff on the back end. This team just, they seem to me to be a team that just always does it together. And when the offense was slow at the beginning of the year, weren't scoring in the high 30s and the 40s, the defense stepped up. And then towards the middle of the season, the offense just started rolling, and 40-point games to them just kind of seemed routine. And here in the playoffs, 600-yard games have been routine. They're averaging 600 yards per game. And so you take overall what this team has done, it seems fitting that they're now in Frisco, Texas.
You know, North Dakota State's a big test for them, but you know, they possibly could be missing a quarterback. He's been injured. Several factors that are going into where JSU could possibly win this game. You know, people are saying, oh, North Dakota State's going to come in there and kill them, but that's not really the case.
Not this year. And I think that the thing that separates this year from past years is just like JSU last year had a big issue with injuries. North Dakota State has a big injury issue with their quarterback, because their quarterback is the same guy that led them to a 15-1 season last year. His name is Carson Wentz. He's a senior. But what he gives that team is that confidence that he's been there before. He's been through the fire of a national championship game. Last year, he was a first-year starter last year, led him to a championship. And so they don't have that. So they stick in Easton Stick, and he's a freshman. And he's done well so far because Wentz broke his wrist 6 games ago. He's won 6 of those games. And so at this point, I just think that JSU, it depends on the matchup, but even if they put the senior quarterback in, Carson Wentz, he's now 6 games rusty. So, and Coach Chris Kleiman, I mean, maybe to his credit, he's making JSU prepare for both guys. But I just don't see, you know, do you throw in the hot hand? Do you throw in the guy that's been there before? It is interesting I just think both ways it works out well for JSU's defense.
Well, the JSU Gamecocks headed out Wednesday for Frisco, Texas, and here's what Coach John Gross had to say this week as they prepare for the national championship.
We've about handled every situation you run across, and that all has definitely prepared us, and helped us get to this point. So definitely, we're not satisfied with just being here. We want to win the game and go win the game and have fun playing it. So it has been a special journey, to watch this bunch blossom into having an opportunity to win a national championship.
They've been there, this is their 5th year. So this just like, I saw something on Twitter like saying something about, this their homecoming or something like that. And when you think of a FCS program that's been great over the last couple of years, you think of North Dakota State. That's the first football team you think of, no matter who you are, what you stand for, you think of North Dakota State.
And you can see JSU and North Dakota State. That's 11 a.m. Saturday on ESPNU. Now, New Year's Eve, we saw some great football. We ended the year with great football to get ready for this coming Monday as Alabama takes on Clemson. What are your thoughts of the playoff games from New Year's Eve?
Well, I have 2 thoughts on them. One is a kind of a TV side of it, our side of it, so to speak. And the other is the way the games played out. The bowl season in general, a lot of blowouts, and you saw that with Alabama and Michigan State. But I just think that Alabama, they play the kind of football that Michigan State plays, but they just play it so much better. And I think that was on display in Dallas last week. Another thing that I think about with the championship game is that Clemson looks the part. And Clemson at this point, I think we would have backed this up 6 weeks ago. We would have said Alabama in a landslide. But Clemson, it seems to me, with each game gains more confidence, and they really impressed me with a huge win over Oklahoma.
You know, and it's interesting because this is another one of those matchups where you look at the dynasty of Alabama, and people are saying, oh, this is going to be a blowout.
Right.
But you look at Clemson, and Dabo Swinney's done a great job this season.
Right.
He was the coach of the year. And I really like the energy he brings, and we saw a lot of that in Oklahoma. And I think that really drives the players, and that's going to help them this weekend.
Oh, for sure. And if you want to have some fun with it, you can kind of mirror these two games on the FBS level and the FCS level. You have Alabama, who's like North Dakota State.
Right.
They're in it all the time, and this is their home, so to speak. You have Clemson, the budding power. That's what JSU has been so far over the last maybe 3 or 4 years. Sniff the top 10, in the top 5. Now the top team in the country, like Clemson is, but they don't have the experience on that stage. And if those players show up on that stage, both for Clemson and for JSU, I think they can give Alabama fits. I just think that overall, what we've seen is the dominance of what Nick Saban has brought to his Alabama program since he first started. And you could tell he likes this team. He likes this team a lot more, maybe a lot more than some of the other past teams, and more so, I think, in the on the field and off the field. And I think that whenever Saban likes a team like that, those teams do well in big games. Now, Clemson on the other side, like we talked about with Dabo Swinney, they've put together a team that has a lot of good players. There's a lot of NFL guys on that roster, and it'll be a really interesting matchup because I think for the first time, really probably since the LSU game, Alabama will find a team that can match up with them physically up front.
You know, and Dabo Swinney, Clemson head coach, he knows this is going to be a tough game, and here's what he had to say this week about playing Alabama.
And this is their 4th national championship in 7 years. You know, so we want to be the best. So let's go play the best team out there and see if we can get it done, and measure up. You know, if we're good enough to get it done, we'll get it done. If we're not, and we'll go back to work and keep working. So I think it's exactly the way I would have wanted it to be.
And looking forward to both of those national championship games. We'll have all the reaction from both of those games next week on The Locker Room. We're going to grab a timeout right now. When we come back, we'll talk some high school basketball, so stay with us in The Locker Room. Back here in The Locker Room, our first show of 2016. And let's take a look at our first high school basketball power poll of 2016. Let's take a look at the girls now. Not a lot of change up at the top. Anniston keeps rolling along. Spring Garden at number 2. Gadsden City 3. Moved Sachs in to number 4. They're having a great season so far. Pleasant Valley been having a heck of a season. They're in at number 5 in the power poll. Jacksonville at 6. Piedmont 7. Ohatchee, they're on a roll. They're at number 8. I got to see Boaz last week. They're a very talented girls basketball team, and put Oxford in there at number 10. And let's take a look at the boys power poll now. Gadsden City at number 1, Sacred Heart at 2, Anniston 3, Cherokee County 4, Talladega 5, Westbrook 6, White Plains Wildcats at 7, Sachs at 8, Alexandria 9, and Oxford at 10, guys.
Yeah, some takeaways. You talked about how off the camera how Boaz, really impressed you, and it'll be interesting to see what they do in North Alabama as they get set for the regional tournament. It's one of those teams that we don't see very often down in this area. But once again, the cream of the crop is still those top 3 teams, those blue bloods, so to speak, of high school basketball that. Towards the middle and end of the season, especially when we get to the county tournament, it'll be really fun to see some of these teams pitted against one another.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. It's kind of like at the beginning of the year, not much has really changed. Like, what was the old Dennis Green, the old Vikings coach comment? They were who they thought we were.
Right.
Who they are who we thought they were.
Right.
And that's kind of the way it is this season. The teams we thought were going to be good are good.
Yeah. And the county tournament is coming up in a couple of weeks. Got a chance to go over there Sunday to Jacksonville High School and check out the girls and boys seeding meetings. So let's take a look at the county tournament seeds for this 2016 tournament. Let's take a look at the girls first. There you see the top 6. Anniston, Sachs, Jacksonville, Pleasant Valley, Piedmont, and Ohatchee round out the top 6. Alexandria comes in at number 7. Oxford at 8. Wellborn 9. Jacksonville Christian at 10. Weaver 11. White Plains 12, Faith Christian at 13, Donahoe Sacred Heart 14 and 15.
This tournament usually winds up a little bit like the NCAA tournament, where we expect a lot of those first round games to be what they are, a lot of blowout games. But then towards the middle and towards the end, it is no surprise if you see a 5 seed or a 6 seed move into the semifinals. And so I'm interested to see what a Pleasant Valley does. A Pleasant Valley girls team who is climbing up in our power poll, which I know is it has a different take than the seeding does, because the seeding is determined by coaches.
Right.
I just think that teams like that can now measure themselves up against some of the teams that we call the better teams in this county.
Yeah, and I think that the 2 defending champions are the teams to beat again this year. And there's a lot of talk on the boys' side. Can anyone challenge Sacred Heart? And on the girls' side, of course, can anybody challenge Anniston? I really don't know. I think they're clear-cut favorites to win it all this year. So that'll be the question going in, is can someone mount a challenge to either one of those teams?
And let's take a look now at the boys Calhoun County basketball tournament seeds. There you see, of course, Sacred Heart sits at number 1, unanimous vote in the meeting. Anniston at 2, White Plains 3, Sachs at 4, Oxford 5, Alexandria 6. That's your top 6. Weaver comes in at number 7. They've been hot lately. Piedmont at number 8, Jacksonville at 9, Ohatchee at 10, Pleasant Valley 11, Faith 12, Welborn 13, Donahoe 14, and Jacksonville Christian 15.
A lot of ink's been spilled about Sacred Heart, so I'll lay off them for just a second. But one of the things that I'm interested to see is a team like Piedmont, who had so many players play football who are just now getting their basketball legs, so to speak. And that's a team that made into Birmingham last year at the state championships. And so this is kind of that time where you turn the corner and you see who you really are. So we'll see who Alexandria really is. We'll see who Weaver really is. Piedmont, Ohatchee, Oxford, some of these teams that are between 5 and 10. And I think that mix right there, to see them and maybe win 1 or 2 county tournament games, will be really interesting to see in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, Gerhard mentioned Sacred Heart. Of course, they're the cream of the crop in the county. And, they kind of emerged a couple of years ago in the tournament. They beat Oxford in that close semifinal game and then lost a close one to Anniston in the championship game. Then they come back last year and they beat Alexandria to win the county championship. This year, I think the gap has widened. I think they're clearly up there by themselves. And then what will be interesting to me about the county tournament is that next group.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot of really good teams on the boys' side. You talk about the Anniston, you talk about White Plains and Sachs and Oxford, Jacksonville. You said Weaver's playing better. There's a good group of teams. Who's going to come out of that and take a shot at Sacred Heart?
Right.
And it's the county basketball tournament. We've seen a lot of upsets over the years, a lot of great games, and we can expect that this year. Like I was saying with Weaver, they put on a show in at the Gadsden State Christmas tournament, beat Alexandria in the championship, beat Westbrook in that tournament as well. So they're having a good year. I can see them emerging. But you can always count on good games in this tournament.
Yeah, in the first round, a lot of times you'll get some of those blowouts, but I like the way that they do it, where the first, I think it's 4 seeds get the double byes, and so you don't get the same blowouts in the 1 to 15 games that you normally would, and which is good because it creates really good competition in those second round games, which is really fun to watch. And I like the way that the tournament is laid out. It's really kind of laid out over 2 weekends, so you get a good chance to see some of the lower seeds in that first weekend, and then some of the higher seeds in the second weekend.
I think on the boys' side, I would be surprised if the seeds didn't hold true at least 1 through 3. I'm not so sure about the Sachs Oxford 4 and 5 seeding. That could have gone either way. It could very well be that Oxford is able to get by Sachs, which would put them against Sacred Heart in the semis. I expect Anniston and White Plains to hold serve and meet in the other semi.
Right.
It's going to be a great county basketball tournament there in a couple weeks over at Pete Matthews Coliseum. Coming up, we'll have the locker room roundtable, so stay with us. Back here in the locker room, got the guys here for the locker room round table. We talked high school basketball just a minute ago. Let's talk some college basketball. LSU knocking off Kentucky last night. Kentucky's been the dominating team for a few years now. Are we going to have a new team in the SEC to bring it out?
I think so. I think that what we're seeing with Kentucky is some of the things that comes back to the heart of the one and done. You really can't get those same players in that core to build to the next year. He's always having to rebuild. And when you have guys that are the first 3 and 4 or 5 picks in the NBA draft, it's feasible to do that.
Right.
When you have a team that's not as talented as maybe the year with Michael Kidd-Gilchrist and DeMarcus Cousins, well, Then you get teams like LSU with teams with good players that have been there for a little while who can upset them. And I think Kentucky has a couple losses on the year. But one of my biggest takeaways from that game is Ben Simmons, because that guy's a double-double machine. He is awesome. I think he's one of those guys that can walk into the NBA and have a huge impact.
Yeah, he's fun to watch, and that game didn't surprise me. I mean, the talent gap is narrowed there. Kentucky's just not quite as heads and shoulders above all the other teams as they have in the previous years. So I think it's kind of a wide open race this year in the SEC.
Back to college football, it's come out, because Clemson started school this week, they're not going to have as much practice time and all that. When it really comes down to it, is that going to matter come Monday?
People can kind of say it doesn't, but I think in a small way it does. Alabama had this situation come up last year and wisely pushed that second semester back a couple of days.
Right.
And I'm not saying they did it for this reason, because I have no evidence to prove that, but you have to figure that was part of the reason why they pushed it back, because they didn't have the same kind of practice time that Oklahoma or that the team that they play, Ohio State, did last year. And now, I'm not going to say that coming in for a couple of extra hours of film is going to make a difference. Fourth quarter, 2nd and 10 on the 35-yard line. You know what I mean? Like just down to the nitty-gritty of the plays. But I just think overall, from a preparation standpoint, it does give Alabama a tad bit of an advantage.
There's no doubt it's an advantage, especially considering how good a coaching staff Alabama has. It is an advantage for Alabama, and I fully expect Saban and his staff to do everything they can to take advantage of it. But there is no doubt that having more time to prepare for something than your opponent is an opportunity for an advantage. There's no doubt.
Auburn with a big win over Memphis last week in the Birmingham Bowl. It was announced right after the game Kevin Steele would be coming over to be the defensive coordinator at Auburn. What kind of hire is this for Auburn?
I think it's a good hire. He is from the Prattville area. He's lived across Highway 82. He's got coaching ties all the way from Dabo Swinney to Coach Osborne over at Nebraska, to Bobby Bowden, and of course with Coach Nick Saban in his last stint with Les Miles at LSU. One of the things I like about the hire is the fact that they got a proven guy on both recruiting trail and on the field. One of the things that is kind of odd about the situation is look what happened at LSU over the last couple of years, that turmoil. And look how many times that Gus Malzahn reportedly swung and missed at other defensive coordinators. So, it'll play itself out. I think they got a good coach for the job. And if he can recruit the way he has recruited over the past few years, then I think they have something special there.
Biggest thing to me is I don't know how I've been in sports for so long and didn't know a lot of this stuff that he talked about in his press conference. I had no idea the ties he had to this state. I had no idea where he grew up, that he had most of his family within a 100-mile radius of Auburn. Now, how did I not know all this? I was kind of meh about it. I thought, well, he must have been way down his list. But after listening to him in the press conference, I wanted to sign up and play. I mean, I'm thinking, why did it take Malzahn so long to hire this guy? If he is as impressive going forward as he was in that introductory press conference, Auburn's got themselves a pretty good coordinator.
And I think you touched on something that Auburn usually goes for Auburn men. Auburn guys, what they talk about. Same thing over at Michigan. And he seems to me like the quintessential kind of Auburn guy. His first college football game, he was a first grader.
And all I associated him with was Alabama.
Right. And I just think, and from that respect, I didn't think about that. That's a great point for Auburn. They got a guy that they normally would go after.
The ties to Larry Blakeney, first game ever watched was in Auburn, where Pat Sullivan's number. I mean, I just didn't know all that existed. So I think it's a great hire, really do.
Anxious to see how he does next year over at Auburn. It's time for our national championship predictions. Now, we talked a little bit about the championships earlier today in the show, but first off, JSU, North Dakota State, Gerhard.
This is one of those where I'm not going with the home team because I'm just trying to keep the fans appeased. If North Dakota State starts Easton Stick, JSU can run away with this game. I think that they will start Carson Wentz if he's coming back healthy, and I am going with Jacksonville State to win.
Mickey?
Yeah, I just think that while North Dakota State has all the experience, they've been in this game, obviously winning it for the last 4 years. And you never know how teams are going to match up till they get on the field with each other. But I just think JSU's just got too much firepower on both sides of the line of scrimmage to lose this game. So I'm going with JSU.
I'm going JSU as well. I just hope it doesn't come down to the North Dakota State because they've been there they're going to win this. JSU's had so many good games this year. I can see that bleeding over into this weekend and them winning the national championship. But now let's take a look at the national playoff championship between the Alabama Crimson Tide and Dabo Swinney's Clemson Tigers.
This is one of these games where Alabama is that team, I think Mickey's talked about it a couple times on this show, where if they do this, I'm going against them for the rest of the year. If they do this, I'm going with them for the rest of the year. They've done everything that I've needed to see against everybody outside of the NFL. I like the Alabama Crimson Tide in this game. A lot of it mainly because they've been there before. This team, I think, is different from any other team. And I just think, especially if Shaq Lawson doesn't play in the game for Clemson, they won't get the pass rush on Jake Coker, and they won't get the presence that he brings in the run game either. And, and Alabama's offense can have a huge day.
This is going to be interesting. I tell you, Alabama with that defense and Clemson with kind of the mojo behind them right now, they almost seem destined, almost seem like a team of destiny. I don't think they match up with Alabama. I don't think they stack up with them talent-wise. I still think they've got a good shot in the game. I'm picking Alabama, but I really wouldn't be surprised if Clemson made it a good one.
You know, Clemson's not one of those teams you expect in the national championship every year. And they, you know, in the past few years they've done good. John Holder's been telling me since June it was going to be Alabama and Clemson playing for a championship. But I'm going with Alabama in this one. I was impressed with Clemson last week, but I'm going to with the Tide in this one. I think they're a lot. But after watching them play Michigan State, I think they're a lot better football team.
Yeah, and I don't think this can be taken away by any means. I think one of the things that Alabama proved in their last game is they can rely on Jake Coker on any down. They can rely on him on first down in the first quarter or on third down in the fourth quarter. And I think that mixed in, because I think when Robert Foster went down, the Alabama passing game was put into question altogether. And I think Calvin Ridley has been amazing ever since then, and he's kind of been the new Amari Cooper.
And I'm going to go back to what you said earlier. I think the fact that Alabama has more preparation time may be the reason they win this game, because they're playing a type of offense that can do something against this defense.
Right.
And you give Nick Saban and these players all this extra preparation time to deal with this Clemson offense, that may be what does it for Alabama.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. And again, next week here on The Locker Room, we'll have all the post-game reaction from Saturday's FCS National Championship. Again, that's 11 a.m. on ESPN2. You can see JSU and North Dakota State. And then Monday night, it's the playoff championship between Alabama and Clemson. That'll do it for this week's edition of The Locker Room. We'll be back here next week for more sports talk here in The Locker Room.